All right, here we'd like to take a look at this really super important concept in computer science, which is loops. You're going to see a lot of questions that have to deal with this. They're exceptionally useful. We're going to see loops come back over and over and over throughout this course. The whole idea with loops is really this idea of having a section of our program be able to repeat itself. Before we knew a little bit about loops, you probably could have found yourself wanting to do things over and over and having to take the same chunk of code and copy and paste and copy and paste and copy and paste. And eventually, your program started to get pretty long, right? But you realized, hey, I'm basically doing the same thing over and over and over. There's got to be a better way. And we're going to do this with a concept called loops. There are a number of different types of loops that we're going to talk about. You really want to know a little bit about each of them, how they work, why they work, a little bit maybe when to use them. In reality, you probably could write any loop using any type of loop. Just depends on how the syntax is done and how the coding is done. But you will be expected to use and be able to recognize each of the different types of loops. So we're going to take a look at the different types of loops and kind of how they work in the next couple of videos here. So generally, we have in a loop, we have two parts, I guess. First is the body of the loop. You'll see here in the code in a second that there is a series of statements that want to be repeated. Okay, so here's the block of one statement, 5 statements, 100 lines of code. This is the lines of code that I want to be repeated. And then there's going to be some mechanism to be able to check, should we continue repeating? All right, and we'll see that here in a second. Each time the loop body itself, the actual code inside the loop, repeats itself, we call that an iteration. Big fancy word there, an iteration. Every time the loop repeats, we say the loop iterates. Okay, it'll keep running. You say the loop is running and running and running. Then eventually we will have a statement where we can determine the loop is eligible to stop. Okay. All right. So our first type of loop is called a while loop. And the way I will describe this, or the sentence I can use to describe this, is please continue repeating these statements while a certain statement is true. Okay, there will be some controlling Boolean expression inside the while loop that will determine when this loop should stop. Okay, or how long should this loop run for? Keep running on as long as this statement is true, is another way to say it. Okay, so here is that Boolean expression in this while loop, right? So the key word in the while loop is while. And then inside parentheses here, you're going to have some sort of a Boolean expression. This needs to be an expression that can evaluate the true or false. It can be something very simple like this. It could be something much more complex, which we'll see as we get later on in the course. But it just has to be something that can evaluate the true or false. This loop, in this particular case, will continue to run as long as that statement there is in fact still true. The minute that statement becomes false, the while loop will end. So in this case, we have some variable here called count, and we're going to keep running this loop as long as count is less than or equal to 5. That's it. And so here inside the curly brackets, this is what we call the body of the loop. So here are all of the statements that would be repeated over and over and over. And in this case, we're just going to print count out onto the screen with a space. Print the value of count out onto the screen with a space, excuse me, and then increment count. Okay, so this will just keep running and running and running until count is greater than or equal to 5, or when count finally becomes greater than 5, when this statement is no longer true, that's when the loop will stop. Okay, so if we had to put this maybe in like a flow chart, when the loop starts, the first thing it will do is evaluate that logical statement. If that logical statement is true, go ahead and execute whatever's in the loop, go ahead and do what it does, and come back. Evaluate again. Is count still less than or equal to the number we set? If it's true, execute again, do these things, go back to the top, and keep going, keep looping until count is no longer less than or equal to whatever number we set, and then finally get out of the loop. end, stop running. Okay. When the loop finally finishes and we go through that whole loop, when the loop ends, it would then go to the next line in the program underneath the loop and just continue wanting to work down. All right, so here's an example of what this could look like. So here's our loop right here. And I'm trying to keep track of the value in count. I'll keep track of it in this box, and then what's actually going onto the screen in this box. Okay. So we will initialize the value of count to 1. Cool. 1 currently has the value of 1. Count currently has the value of 1. Cool. While count is less than or equal to 10, do whatever it says here. Cool. Is count currently less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. So we'll do whatever it says here. So let's print out the value of count, put it out on the screen. There's 1. And now add 3 to the value of count. Count now has the value of 4. Cool. Come back up to the top of the loop. Cool. Is 4 less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. So let's go and do the value of the loop here. Let's print out the 4. And now add 3 to the value of count. Now we're up to 7. Come back to the top. Let's try it again. Is count less than or equal to 7? Less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. Print out count. And add 3 to count. Now the value of count is 10. Cool. Is the count less than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. So let's print 10 on the screen and add 3 to count. Count is now equal to 13. Let's go back up to the top and check. Is count less than or equal to 10? No, it is not. So this statement is now false. The loop ends. So this would really be the final output of your program here, 1, 4, 7, 10. Okay, so that's the basics here with a while loop. You're going to write some statement. The key to this loop here is whatever statement goes inside the parentheses first needs to be a logical statement. There has to be some sort of a logical operator in there, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, not equal to, something like that, or some statement that could evaluate to true or false. And this loop will continue to run as long as this statement is a true statement. The minute this becomes false, the loop ends.